There I was, driving through Colorado in the middle of the night. I'd made it to Tabernash by then, and it had to be around 1 a.m. I pulled into a gas station to fill up and grab a quick snack. After that, I got right back on the road. There wasn't a single car out at that hour, especially not on the roads I was taking, but I still stuck to the speed limit. It was late, I was tired, and you never know where a cop might be hiding. I was doing about 55 on this winding road when out of nowhere, those dreaded flashing lights showed up in my rearview mirror that I glanced back and saw the vehicle behind me with red and white lights going. I pulled over, but not before checking my speed. I was only maybe 2 miles per hour over, if that. I eased onto the shoulder, and so did the car behind me that I was seriously annoyed. I'd never been pulled over before, and I'm always a careful, cautious driver. Right away, I felt like this stop wasn't legit that I asked the officer walked up to my window. I rolled it down. He greeted me and asked for my license and registration. I tried to stay calm and stand up for my rights. I wasn't just going to hand everything over without question. So I asked, "Is there a reason you pulled me over?" He said he'd get to that in a minute. I told him I knew I wasn't speeding, I wasn't swerving, and none of my taillights were out, so I wasn't comfortable giving him my license if this was an unlawful stop. Then I took a closer look at his uniform. Something was off. He was dressed all in black with a vest that looked like a police tactical vest, but it didn't say police anywhere on it. His badge didn't say police either, it said Criminal Task Force. He kept asking for my license and registration. I straight up asked him, "Are you actually a cop?" He said he was part of an undercover unit. Then he asked for my license again, that I asked for his badge number. He told me he didn't have to give me that. I knew enough about traffic stops to know that wasn't true. I also noticed his lights were only red and white, no blue. I wasn't totally sure if that was a red flag for a fake cop, but combined with everything else, it made the whole thing way more suspicious. The guy started telling me to step out of the car. I said, respectfully, that I wasn't comfortable doing that until he could get a supervisor out here. He raised his voice and got more aggressive, repeating that I needed to get out, that I told him I didn't think he was a real cop, and if he was, he wouldn't have a problem calling his supervisor. I rolled the window up a little. He didn't like that at all. He yelled at me to open the door, put his hands on my window, and tried to unlock it, that I pushed his hands away, started the engine, and shifted into drive. I heard him shout stop, as I floored it and took off. My heart was pounding. I was praying I was right, because if I wasn't, I was headed straight to jail. But hoping I was right also meant this guy was impersonating a cop, which showed just how dangerous the situation really was. As I drove away, still sticking to the speed limit, I saw his car with the lights on coming up fast behind me. The only thing I could think to do was call 911, that I told the dispatcher I was being chased by someone I believed was a fake cop. I explained that he refused to give his badge number, his car was unmarked with no blue lights, and his uniform didn't say police. After she got my location and more details, I told her I was actively being pursued. She gave me the address of the nearest police station, the Fraser Winter Park Police Department, and told me to head there. She said she'd dispatch an officer to meet me. The guy followed me with his lights on for about half the way, but suddenly at an intersection, he turned them off and went right, disappearing from sight. Just like that, he was gone. That's when it hit me. My gut was right the whole time. I'd been pulled over by someone pretending to be a cop, that I still drove straight to the police station. There was already an officer sitting in his patrol car in the parking lot. I pulled in, and he got out right away, like he knew exactly who I was. That I told him every single detail. The guy's face, his car, the intersection where he turned. He took down my contact info, probably in case they needed me later to ID the guy. After a few minutes, I was on my way. I'm so glad I trusted my instincts and didn't get out of the car. I can only imagine where things would have gone if I had. I'm 29 years old, and I live alone in my house in a small town in Michigan. On weekends, I head out there to get away from the city life I grew up in and got totally burned out on. I love being in a quiet rural spot, but my house and property are straight out of a horror movie, the kind with a big lot, no neighbors right next door, and plenty of space around you. You don't hear about much crime in my town, mostly because there aren't a lot of people around. I don't have many friends out here, but that's not the point anyway. I come to be by myself and escape the stress from work and people in general during the week. One Friday, shortly after I got to the house after the drive, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a guy holding a clipboard. Right away, I knew he was selling something. He asked if I was happy with my security system. I told him I didn't have one, but I wasn't really interested, and I joked that nobody's breaking into this rundown place that he launched into his pitch anyway, talking about all these recent break-ins in the area that, honestly, I'd never heard about. Then he asked who I lived with. I said I live alone, so I didn't really need it. He kept pushing, though, asked me to at least give him my phone number, so he could follow up in a couple weeks and see how I was feeling. He even offered to waive the installation fee right then and there. I figured why not, it actually sounded like a decent deal, so I gave him my number. He thanked me and took off. After that, I went to the kitchen to start making dinner, then settled into the living room to keep watching Yellowstone. I was on a serious binge, knocking out episode after episode for hours on the couch. That IT was around 11 o'clock at night when there was another knock at the door. 11 at night is way past any reasonable time to come knocking, especially out here. I'm not tight with the neighbors, so I didn't think it was one of them. I ignored it and kept watching my show. The knocking kept going though. I still didn't get up. There was no way I was answering the door at 11 p.m. I stayed put, but after a third round of knocks, I started getting worried. They weren't leaving that I went to the door and called out, "Who's there?" No answer from the other side. This was exactly how a horror movie kicks off. I wasn't about to open the door and find out. Through the door, I said I wasn't interested in whatever they were selling, and that I had a gun I wasn't afraid to use. I don't actually own a gun, but it's a simple enough threat to scare someone off. I figured that worked because the knocking stopped. I went back to the couch. Then my cell phone started ringing. The caller ID said, 911 Emergency Services. I'd never gotten a call from 911 before. I didn't even know that was possible. I always thought if the police called, it'd show up as blocked or something. I answered, and a guy on the other end asked, "Is this George?" I said yes. He said, "This is the police department. We have officers outside your house right now. There's been a report of a crime on your block, and we have some questions for you." Something felt completely off. I asked him to have the officers come to the window so I could see them before I opened the door. He said he couldn't do that. They were already outside. That made zero sense. I told him I wasn't answering any questions, sorry, and hung up. Even if it had been real police, I didn't have any legal obligation to open the door anyway. But this was a screaming trap from every angle. They called again from the same number. I rejected it and switched my phone to Do Not Disturb. I actually called 911 myself to check if those calls were legit. The operator immediately said no, they were absolutely fake. And with someone having just been at my door, she told me to lock everything, grab anything I could use as a weapon, and stay inside until real officers arrived. While I was still on the phone with her, I heard the back doorknob jiggling, like someone was trying to force it open. Then came these huge bangs, like they were ramming or kicking the door. I told the operator, and she said the police would be there in under 10 minutes. I needed them right then. I went to the back door and yelled, "You want to get shot?" There was a shout from the other side saying, "It's the police, open up," followed by another hard kick. The back door has a window right next to it, unlike the front, so I looked out. There were two masked guys trying to kick it in. When I say masked, I mean they had these creepy burlap sacks over their heads with rough cut holes for eyes and mouths. They saw me at the window, and must have spotted me on the phone. I guess they realized I was talking to actual 911, because they bolted into the darkness. About 5 minutes later, there was a knock from the real police. I let them in. One of the officers was great. He even searched the whole property for me. Having two patrol cars out front with their lights flashing for half an hour had to be a solid deterrent if anyone thought about coming back. After the cops left, I noticed one of the patrol cars parked out front for hours. I'm sure they left at some point during the night. That I'm done opening the door for anyone who shows up unannounced, though. I'm 99% sure that guy pretending to sell security systems was just casing houses, and he and his crew were spoofing 911 calls to trick people into opening up late at night. That I went to my nearest neighbors and asked if the salesman had knocked on their doors too. They said no. For some reason, my house was the only one on the street they targeted. I guess I was the first one they tried, and I looked like an easy mark.